So that's 2 wholes, and you get 2 tenths. There's another way we could think about it for some of your students who just cannot stand what Eureka is showing them. We have alternatives, and that's the whole point. In fact, that's what Eureka Math is saying, is we have so many alternatives. We have so many different ways to think about these numbers and share all of the different ways for our students so that they can grasp onto a couple of those methods and really understand the mathematics rather than just have it be a bunch of rules that they're memorizing. So using place value discs, we're going to represent 2 ones and 3 tenths. So what is that going to look like? Well, 2 ones and 3 tenths is going to look like 2 ones and 3 tenths. But if we want to convert this into nothing but plain old tenths, we know that this dot can be exchanged for 10 tenths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we know that this dot can be exchanged for 10 tenths. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these dots have been exchanged for tenths. So these whole numbers have been exchanged for tenths. So what do we end up with? We end up with 23 tenths. So another way to think of it, 2 ones and 3 tenths is equal to 2 and 3 tenths, which is equal to 23 tenths. Using the same idea, if we want to change these into hundredths, so we have 3 tenths and 3 hundredths, so 3 tenths, oops, no, that's not where I want it, 3 tenths, 1, 2, 3, and 3 hundredths, 1, 2, 3, and then we know that each of these tenths is going to be converted into 10 hundredths, so we're going to end up with, right here, this becomes 10 hundredths, this becomes 10 hundredths, and this becomes 10 hundredths, so we end up with 33 hundredths. So another way to say that is 0.33, so 3 tenths and 3 hundredths is equal to 33 hundredths. Now what we're going to do is we're kind of removing the scaffolding and allowing our students to choose either the area model or the place value system, the dots, the place value discs, place value discs. We're going to convert 1.3 into 3 tenths. So I know that 1 whole, 1.3, I know that 1 whole is 10 tenths, and I know that 0.3 is 3 tenths, so that becomes 13 tenths. That's one way to think of it. And I could say, well, 10.3, another way to think of that, well, 10 is equal to 100 tenths, because each whole number is 10 tenths. So 10 whole numbers is 100 tenths, plus we have 3 more tenths. So this could be 103 tenths. 103 tenths. That's one way to show it. Another way you could have shown it is use that place value discs. And these are your tenths. Here's your decimal. And then we have ones here and tens here. So what are we going to do? Well, we know that we have what says is 110. So that means we have 110 and we have 3 tenths way over here. So that's our place value disc. Now we know that if we cache this one dot in, this 110, we get 10 ones. So that becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then, so that guy's gone because he's been exchanged for 10 ones. And then we know that each of these ones can then be exchanged for tenths. So that we're going to, each one of these dots gets exchanged. So 10 times 10 is 100, plus the 3, there's our 103 tenths. So you got a variety of ways to explain this. More of the same concept, only now we're turning them into hundredths. So we could think of that 1.3 as 100 hundredths is our 1, and that 3 tenths, we can think of that as 30 hundredths. So we have 130 hundredths if we wanted to think of it that way. Now, if we wanted to think about it in terms of the place value chart, ones, tens, hundreds. So we've got hundredths right here, hundredths, tenths, here's our decimal point, and here's our ones. And so if we wanted to, we could say, well, to model 1.3 would be 1, and in fact, I want to use bigger dots there. So that would be 1, and then 3 tenths would be 1, 2, 3. So we've just modeled 1.3, 1 and 3 tenths. And then what we could do is we could start this process of exchanging. So if we were to exchange this guy into tenths, we would get 10 tenths. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we would end up with, now we have 13 tenths. Now, if we were going to exchange these into hundredths, each of these tenths gets replaced or gets exchanged for 10 hundredths. So there's 13 of them. So that means we're going to get 13 times 10, which we're going to end up with 130 dots over here, 130 hundredths. So that's another way that we could be thinking about this. And lastly, we're kind of bringing it all home. We're just bringing it all home to say, well, how are we taking that decimal, writing it as a mixed number, writing it as tenths, and then writing it as hundredths, right? And so one of the cool things is, let's do 5.3. So we know that 5.3 is 5 and 3 tenths. And we can kind of use logic, but we don't have to. But we could think of 5 as 50 tenths plus 3 tenths, so that's going to be 53 tenths, which is 53 tenths. Now, how can we get that to become hundredths? Well, one idea that we learned in an earlier lesson in this module is the idea that if you want, you can multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10, and you will get an equivalent value. So suddenly you get the equivalent value of 530 over 100, because 53 times 10 is 530, 10 times 10 is 100, and so there is our hundredths. And if we wanted to, we could say, well, that's the same thing as 530 hundredths. And I ran out of room. Hundredths. There you go. So there's a couple of ways that you can, that's another way that you can make these connections between tenths and hundredths. If I want to do, we could do 68.5. So that's going to be 68 and 5 tenths. And 68 and 5 tenths. We know that 8 and 5 tenths would be 85 tenths. So because we have a 60 here, that's actually going to make 685 tenths. That's another way we could think about this. So that becomes 685 tenths. Crazy. But if you want hundredths, you're going to end up with 6,850 hundredths. That gets pretty, it's a big old huge number. And that wraps up kind of a really fun one. Teachers, parents, don't worry about going too fast. You might.
All right. So what we want to do now is we want to do some practice. We want to reach our goal of being able to think about decimals and fractions in comparison. Mm. All right, so what we want to do is we want to make certain that we are practicing our goal of trying to make the connection between decimals and fraction equivalents. And we want to make certain that we're using the place value chart. So what I would like for you to do is I want you to go onto iReady, complete the assigned lesson on decimals, and I want you to get some practice there. I would like for you to also make certain that you go on Zearn to complete lesson 8. Use your tools. Be sure to reach out to a partner either through Google Classroom or by phone and make sure that you are assessing your work. Have fun, guys. Oh, wait, one more thing. Sorry. Please make sure you're doing the exit ticket. You have an exit ticket, so make certain that you're doing the exit ticket.